Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, February the 17th, 2015 in the Memorial Arena in Victoria. I would like to thank our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes the program happen. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, and Walter, it has been another absolutely crazy week in the world, and I think I'm coming to the conclusion that, now what was the conclusion I was coming to? I don't know if I can remember. Oh yeah, it's all a pack of lies.
Yeah.
The whole story is a pack of lies. Right now the big thing is measles and vaccines. And people like me who don't believe in the safety of vaccines and don't believe in the effectiveness of vaccines, and maybe I'm stupider than the rest of us, but you know, I've seen some things in terms of medical textbooks and what I consider to be reasonably good information that makes me think that vaccines aren't safe. But we're under attack by the media, and the media seems to be trying to make other people afraid of us, just like they're afraid of ISIS. We're like the new ISIS. And the reason I say it's all a pack of lies is because the media doesn't care about your health. The media does not care about your health, right? CTV doesn't care as they're ramming it down everybody. So I saw the headline the other day. I turned on CTV National News. On the bottom of the screen, three measles cases found in Ontario. Like 3 measles cases found in Ontario is leading the news. But the fact is that they don't care about your health. They're just using this because, I think it's two things. One, there's a lot of money to be made in vaccines, and they want to vaccinate everybody as often as they possibly can. And two, they want to break this barrier where people now have the right to refuse to get vaccinated, or really to refuse any kind of medical treatment that we don't think is safe. It seems they want to take that away, because what they're pushing, and I'm talking about especially the media, CTV, CFAX, Times Columnist, Globe and Mail, all of them, they're pushing the idea that we're a danger to others if we don't get vaccinated. And I don't think that's what the science says, and I don't think that's the truth. If it is, and if vaccines are safe and effective, then I'm all for them, really. But I don't think they are. For example, I just got the insert from the CRD, from the flu vaccine. It contains both mercury and formaldehyde, right? And they're injecting that into your body, and if you tell them you don't want that, then now it's like you can't work in a hospital or unless you start wearing a mask. That's the kind of power that I think this is really all about. And just to finish off, to show you how little the media care, here's a story. Well, I'll mention the story of Vioxx. The drug Vioxx, between I think around the year 2000 and the year 2005, killed 5,000 Canadians, right? And I'm sure for a part of that, the company knew and the government regulators knew, the Canadian government knew that it was killing people. This was the drug Vioxx. 5,000 Canadians dead, 50,000 in the United States. It was a painkiller. Do you remember any attack by the media on the makers, which was Merck, by the way, the Merck company, any attack from saying these people are a threat to public health, they should be stopped, they should be jailed? No, we who don't believe in vaccines are the threat. It's money and profit and power. And boy, we're in trouble because it's the same on every issue.
Well, on the Vioxx story, I mean, I had a friend who had a heart attack who was taking Vioxx, and I remember I was really interested, and you brought these points up, and it was very peculiar because, you know, say people are old and they're infirmed and they're having all these health problems, and then they take a drug and they have a bad effect. You say, well, there's so many other things wrong with them, but so many of these people that were dying were athletes and very young people that were taking Vioxx, that they were having heart attacks. So it was startling to hear that, and very little was ever said about it.
Yeah, and this isn't like we're saying maybe it did. No, there's no question about it. I mean, it was pulled off the market, hundreds of millions of dollars or maybe billions of dollars in lawsuits, but it doesn't matter. You know, everything continues.
Yeah, and on the talking about vaccines, is that I'm sort of somewhere in the middle where I'd say, well, let's look at the vaccine that you want us to take and let's investigate it and, look at the evidence of it, how effective it is. I'm not like just going to say no vaccines. But like with the flu shot, you can't find any solid evidence. So even though the health authorities are saying, oh yes, it's so effective, but when you get right down to looking at their evidence, it gets pretty shaky. And we've dug up evidence that flu vaccines do not work. And some very credible organizations have been saying that. Scientists have been saying that. So
well, that's because they don't work.
Yeah, because they don't work. So, but the thing is, with the flu vaccine, but if you took a look at other types of vaccines, you might consider them. Like measles might be a good vaccine to have. So, but what happens is when, people that actually ask questions get vilified. Like, I don't know for sure. I start asking questions and people think I'm like I'm a radical. I'm saying, no, I just want to know about it a little more in depth. And that's a problem because right now, if you watch the media, it really is getting to a point where you hardly dare to ask a question.
There was a story today, I can't remember where I saw it, but it was about the RCMP is warning the government of, I think it's anti-oil radicals or something. I don't remember the exact terminology, but yeah, these anti-oil radicals are a threat. So here's, because of ISIS, which is a whole nother story, all our laws are being changed to protect us from terrorism. And meanwhile, here's the RCMP over here telling the government that, well, people who don't like pipelines really are going to be terrorists. So here's the laws being made to protect us from the terrorists while we are being made the terrorists by the power structure.
Yeah, and where does that all end? I mean, you have a Harper agenda and this oil agenda, and obviously they're spinning every story they can. These are well thought out stories. When I was looking at the activities of public relations firms last year and trying to figure out what role they were playing, and one firm had 110,000 employees spread out worldwide into around 100 different countries.
Which firm was that? Is that Hill Knowlton?
I believe it was Hill and Knowlton. The company that owns Hill and Knowlton. Oh. Hill and Knowlton is only part of the of this company. It has a very strange name. You wouldn't recognize it anyway. But you realize that with that many people who know how to spin a message, 110,000 of them around the world. Do you imagine what they can do with any story they want?
Yeah.
Do you wonder how the ISIS story has legs? I mean, they have people in every news bureau in the world influencing every broadcast.
And plus they own it.
If they don't own it, they're influencing it heavily. They certainly influence international news so profoundly.
So I guess, I mean, it seems to be always an underlying message of this program is don't believe what the media is telling you. You simply cannot believe it. They don't work for you. They don't have your interests at heart. The media is a corporate propaganda machine. I mean, it's owned by big business. There's half a dozen corporations in Canada that own virtually everything, all the television, all the radio, all the newspapers. And their job is to manipulate us, and they do. They do it very effectively. I believed it all for a large part of my life. And even now, I'm shocked almost on a daily basis because I've been involved in thinking about media for a long time. It still amazes me how deep their penetration is. I mean, I speak to people who are very, just ordinary people, and they believe the story. They believe the story. And
well, they're not asking enough questions.
But I don't blame them for believing the story. It's a very effective, and it's extremely dangerous, as we can see on every front, from the homeless problem, which they deliberately caused, to the genetic contamination of our whole food supply, to fracking, to the economy. I mean, it's insane. It's all deliberate, and they couldn't do it if they didn't own a media, the media, our media.
Well, the CBC is still owned by the Canadian taxpayers, but if you look at the decline in the quality of the news section of CBC, both radio and TV, particularly if you watch the National and those types of programs. It's become, they're so battered and they're so afraid of Harper and his boys that the tone of every report is colored by that. And you're finding now where, okay, the ISIS story's been going for a couple of years, really. Last year it's been really hot, but the width of the criticism hasn't broadened in any way. They're not trying to bring any color into the story. They're just sticking with the official line, to the point where any rational person would say, well, I mean, there's other things going on here. Why are you guys hammering the same line night after night? Obviously, there's something you're covering up.
And they want us terrified, and they want us to be afraid, and that's. But keep in mind that, as Walter's talking about ISIS, it's widely reported in other parts of the world that the U.S. funded, started, and controls ISIS. So, and you just have to Google "U.S. funds ISIS." You'll see a lot of very interesting reportage on that matter. And
well, even I read on I can't quote my source, but that the head of the ISIS is a Mossad agent, and the Israeli Secret Service is involved with these guys. So you can see that it's not just the U.S. You find the Secret Service agencies all around the world all sort of interlock at some point, and they all have agendas too, and it's a worldwide thing, and including the attacks on Russia through the Ukraine. All this Arab Spring stuff. They bombed the hell out of all those countries. Now there's turmoil in Libya, and everybody seems to be surprised. Well, we bombed the hell out of them. We destroyed their country. It was a very stable country. They might have had a pretty wacky leader, but it was
the most prosperous country in Africa.
Exactly.
A very prosperous.
Free health care, free education, all that.
Canadian general led the bombing. Our media kept it secret. I mean, we destroyed that country, and we don't even say we're sorry because we don't even know. And this media that lies to us about everything is exactly the media and the politicians and the corporations that are pulling the strings. That's the kind of stuff they're leading us into. We've got to stop them. I mean, we're in a very, very dangerous situation, and I don't know what we can do. I mean, here we are, some little TV show in Victoria, and look at the power they have. They beam these lies into everybody's homes.
Well, I think we just keep speaking the truth or trying to seek the truth. I mean, nobody has a monopoly on it, and it's very hard sometimes to find out what's really going on. But like recently, ISIS is now in Libya, I'm told by the corporate media, and that's only 800 kilometers from Italy.
Oh, right. Now they're saying, they're getting close to Europe,
So we're all supposed to be so freaked out about that.
And we should be, because we don't know what these lunatics who run the world are going to do next. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it's obvious they're trying to create something, and behind that smokescreen, which I think it is, they're taking over the world. I mean, here in Canada, they're saying, oh yeah, we think everybody should get injected with vaccines because they're perfectly safe and they're perfectly effective. And I mean, here. There's something in the Globe and Mail today, Tuesday. They're wondering in Ontario why government and regulatory bodies are standing back as some licensed health professionals sell ineffectives, the Globe and Mail says, homeopathic vaccines and promote anti-vaccine views to patients. So this is front page of the absolutely pathetic Globe and Mail, our leading corporate media spokesman in this country. And look at the way, I mean, is this reporting the news? Or is this putting ideas in everybody's minds while they tell us that, fracking is safe? I mean, obviously fracking, nuclear power can't be a danger. The genetic contamination of our entire food supply is okay. But people who speak against vaccines, well, why isn't somebody doing something about that, says the Globe and Mail, which is just one of the leading corporate propaganda outlets in this country. And as long as they've got that and people believe it, and we're too small to really spread the word, we just seem to be going down.
Well, I think control has been, we've been under the control for quite a few years, and then maybe we've been living in it, being diluted. But now with the game, they're upping the game a bit. Now the screws are getting a little tighter. The Minister of Finance today released his budget in British Columbia and $900 million surplus, and they're all smiles and so happy about it. And they know the media is just going to, with a little bit of criticism, like John Horgan's been criticizing, and there's a few people criticizing, but for the most part, the media is just going to bolster up their story. But, trouble with me and with you and others that we have a memory. We remembered other things like the fact that BC Hydro was a disaster, and they're into hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of debt, and what they're paying out to these private power producers is just draining the coffers, and they're just pretending that debt doesn't exist. And also, teachers and other people who have suffered horribly under this regime are supposed to be all happy about the fact that the government now has a surplus and they don't have the raises and the support in their schools that they should have had. So, but the media is going to not talk about that. They're just going to say, oh, it's a surplus, isn't this wonderful?
Christy Clark works for the same corporations that own the media. Her job, while pretending she's Miss Families First or Ms. Families First, is keeping thousands and thousands and thousands of British Columbia children living in poverty in order to give tax breaks and tax cuts to the 1% of the 1%. That's what Christy Clark is really all about. And it's amazing because it's just as you say, the media is all over this. We've got a $1 billion surplus, right? Thanks to Christy Clark and the Liberals. Well, people are paying a heavy, heavy price for that. The homeless are all over the streets. A lot of people can't get the health care they need. Senior citizens cannot get, 80, 90-year-old people can't be moved into supportive housing. And all of that is then being given to, their money. That money is being taken and given to the rich and powerful. That's what Christy Clark is all about. And she gets full support from the media because they're all about the same thing. Now, maybe that's what we want. Maybe we want to close schools, and maybe we want to not have daycare so the banks can get a tax cut, right? Maybe that's what we want, but maybe it isn't. And the problem is both the politicians and the media never tell us the truth, so we don't even know the issues. There's been $7 billion in tax cuts per year. That's what the Liberal tax cuts, which have mainly been aimed at the people at the top. $7 billion a year now in tax cuts, compared to if we had just kept the same tax regime we had when the NDP came in, or when the NDP left office, 10 years ago. And people have paid a heavy, heavy price for that. And I don't like it, and I don't think it's right. But most importantly, I don't necessarily think that's what people want, but it doesn't matter what we want.
Exactly. I want to bring up something that's not on that topic entirely, but we've been talking about the CRD and how it works, and I was talking about, I expressed my view that I thought we should elect the CRD. For the last couple of days, I've been phoning around, calling the CRD and calling some local politicians and stuff and trying to figure out the CRD. And I didn't know what it was. I thought I did. I thought the CRD was a level of government, but it's not. The CRD is not a government, Jack.
What is it?
Well, one of the people working at the CRD, she said, look, it's like this wall. She says, it's like we're Costco. And the municipalities are all members of a club that they choose to form that can deliver services for them.
Oh, okay.
But it's not a level of government, so you can't vote for them. So I was completely wrong on that.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't work. But I phoned John Rands, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things he told me. He'll probably phone me up and tell me I was wrong. But his view was that we should allow amalgamation to occur in the whole region, particularly in these core communities of Sandage, Victoria, Oak Bay, Esquimalt, View Royal, Colwood, Langford. Should form a city. It's around 250,000 people, and they are the users of the wastewater, of the sewage treatment, and also most of the users of the water supply. And they are the people that are most concerned about urban development, transportation issues, and of course issues all around highways and transportation. So it's natural that they'd form a city. So I changed my mind on this, and I have to agree with him. I think I was against amalgamation. Now I think you got a really good reason to support it. But the kicker was Mayor Rand's expressed his view that we should get rid of the CRD completely. We don't need them. $40 million worth of salaries a year that goes to the CRD that's not needed. And those are the guys who came up with this lunatic idea about the sewage treatment plant. They've shown what they can do, and they can do a lot of harm. And it has a lot to do with the fact that we can't access them really readily. So the sign of intelligence is the ability to change your mind, Jack. And I've changed my mind on this.
We'll have to rethink that whole concept.
But something we should cover it further, because I really think something is very interesting.
Well, amalgamation is important.
Yeah.
I'm not in support of it until I hope that it works. But if it doesn't, I'm not. That's it. Walter, thank you very much. And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Hello and welcome back. Segment 2 of Citizens Forum. Our guest in this segment is Werner Simbeck. Werner, you've been on the show several times before, and we're going to be talking about, I think, climate change.
Yeah, we're going to talk about climate change. Well, last time we talked, and I briefly mentioned this interesting phenomenon that when you change an ice cube from 0 degrees to 0 degrees water, it takes energy to make that phase shift, or that change.
From ice to water.
To ice to water. It takes 80 calories for 1 gram of ice to go from 0 degrees Celsius to 0 degrees water. If you reapplied that same amount of energy to basically melt it from solid to liquid, to that same 1 gram of ice, the question is...
You mean now that it's water?
Now that it's water,
Right.
but it's at 0 degrees.
Right.
How warm will it get if you reapply 80 calories of energy?
Right.
And by definition, it's 80 degrees Celsius.
Right.
Right? So when you hear about that at the North Pole, the Arctic is melting, right? That ice up there is basically our air conditioning unit of the globe.
Right.
When the ice is gone, there's so much solar radiation energy available to heat up the ocean quickly that some people may have not even thought of that before. I had to look it up. I didn't believe it when I first read that. Anyway, so that's what I mentioned last time.
I think what you're saying is we may be in even more serious trouble than we think we are, and it may be coming at us very quickly.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. It's very worrying. This latent heat of water, just a physical phenomenon of water that is going to hit us in the face, basically. So what's going to happen is that the ice is going to melt much faster. It's going to disappear in the summertime in the North Pole. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, in the summertime, when we have long days, in the Arctic, they have 24-hour sunlight, okay? And if you have the North Pole being covered in ice normally, it's a gigantic white sheet, basically. It reflects sunlight back into space. So when sun hits the Arctic, it would reflect most of that solar radiation back into space. But now with the ice melting, you have dark ocean. The ocean absorbs most of that energy. And just this fact that I just told you, that if the ice is melting, now if it's no longer in a solid form, in a liquid form, even though it may be really cold, there's so much solar radiation available to heat that up quickly. And then another thing that most people don't realize, in the Arctic there's a lot of methane hidden underneath the ocean. You may have heard that the oil and gas industry is sort of rubbing their hands and go, wow, we can exploit resources up there. In fact, Gary Lunn, who used to be the resource minister of Canada, he was for Saanich Gulf Islands, I talked to him about this issue actually, about the melting of the North Pole. And he was sort of laughing at me and basically saying, oh, there's so much snow and ice up there, you don't have to worry, Mr. Simbeck, he was telling me, right? He didn't understand that if, when the ice melts, that there's no way to get it back. It's like a one-way street. Because that solar radiation gets absorbed by the ocean, it gets warmer, so then when winter comes, it doesn't freeze over as much and as thick as it used to. So it melts much quicker the next time around summer comes. Anyway, so oil and gas industries sort of rubbing their hands, thinking they can explore and exploit the natural resources that are hiding underneath the ocean floor there. There's expected to be vast quantities of methane in forms of natural gas, right? As well as in form of oil, right? They expect there's lots of oil underneath the ocean there.
Yeah, but it's totally insane.
Yeah, it is, because the reason why they are able potentially to exploit it is because of climate change.
Yes.
It's because of all the carbon we already released, because of all the fossil fuels we've dug up. Now we're going to dig up more and burn more. Anyway, so what I was going to say though is there's a thing called methane hydrate. I think I got that right. Let me just check that. Methane hydrates. What that is methane is natural gas basically, frozen. And there's these methane hydrates at the bottom of the ocean. So basically it's frozen gas, and because of the pressure of the ocean, that's at the bottom of the ocean, it is in a stable form. But if the Arctic becomes ice-free for a large portion of the time in the summertime moving forward, then you have ocean currents starting to mix the bottom, so the bottom turns over basically, so the bottom gets warmer. The bottom of the ocean gets warmer because it's quite a shallow sea. And then you're going to destabilize this frozen methane. And if this methane starts to be bubbling up through the water column, methane is a much stronger greenhouse gas. In a few years scale, it's like hundreds of times, 120 or 150 times as strong as CO2.
So we're in very serious trouble.
Yeah, we are.
The question is, what can we do?
Well,
yeah.
I think people need to, be willing, first of all, to listen to what I say, maybe do their own research, and that's one thing. But realizing that the IPCC is the UN body that's supposed to study the whole thing about climate change, well, they're very conservative, and they're manipulated by politics. So what they've been telling us is actually not the whole truth. And the data that they have is old. And this is happening really quickly. So what we have to do as a citizen is, first of all, get informed, and then try to talk to whoever is going to represent you in the next election. And it doesn't matter if it's Liberal, Conservative, NDP, or Green Party. And of course, the Green Party is probably the only party that's willing to speak up about the fact is that we need to regulate carbon, a carbon tax. They actually will say that. You will not hear that from the NDP. You will not hear that. They're talking about a levy now, the Liberal Party anyway. So what you need to do, you need to talk to your candidate and put some pressure on him. Says, look, I'm concerned about this. You need to get informed, so the candidates themselves need to know about this issue, right? Our government has been blatantly ignoring the science, and scientists have been muzzled, right? And that is sort of a crime, because if you don't have the information, and if the citizens don't get informed from our tax dollar, basically, we pay for these scientists, they should be able to report back to us. We should be able to make informed decisions.
I agree with you 100%, but what can I, if I go speak to my MP or MLA, or none of whom seem to care about this issue in terms of actually getting anything done, but what can I tell them we want? I mean, even locally here, city-wise, I would think we want more trains.
Well, if one person contacts
and more
an
public
MP,
transit.
doesn't do anything. More people have to do it. I mean, if an MP or somebody who runs as a candidate gets a lot of phone calls, a lot of letters, a lot of emails, a lot of people approach him and talk to him about the same issue, I mean, eventually it sticks, right?
Okay, so what we can say is contact your city councillor, contact your member of parliament, contact your provincial MLA, and talk about this issue.
Absolutely.
No matter what you think. I mean, a lot of people
Sure.
think what we're saying is way off base, and there is no such
But
thing
so
as
imagine
climate
the
change.
consequences. Imagine if I'm right, just for instance. If I'm right, meaning what I'm re-quoting from other scientists to say this is really serious. We're about to fall off the edge. If they're right and we don't do anything about it, well,
Yeah,
we basically lost the game. We're screwed, right? Hate to say that. Meaning there won't be a future that's worth living. because imagine what's going to happen. The air conditioning unit of the globe is kaput,
We're going to
broken.
be going through very, very, very...
We're going to have rapid warming.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the Middle East, all the destabilization of all these countries there. It's driven by climate change because they have had droughts and droughts and droughts there. Not enough bread for their own people, like in Egypt. That's what started the whole Egypt revolution, is because they didn't have enough bread and it was super expensive. Right? Anyway, so
Look where they are now, bombing Libya.
And in Syria, it was the same thing, apparently. In Syria, there were farmers who were desperate, and the government ignored them, and that helped spark that revolution, right, which, of course, went south.
And, of course, was also the other spark to that revolution was U.S. Special Forces who started it all out. I mean, what a nightmare that is, but that's another story.
So what people need to do is to do two things, I think. They need to get informed. There's lots of places you can go. And in fact, if you Google this Russian scientist, Natalia Shakova, and type in methane hydrates, you get a little video clip, an interview that she gave in Vienna, Austria. And I think it says it all. You listen to this lady talk about the science that they have done over the last 8 years in the Arctic. They're worried. They're really worried. They're frightened, actually, if really.
And we should all be frightened. I mean, I think that's the point. Maybe we're wrong, but I think we should all be frightened, and we should put this on the front burner where it belongs. Instead of worrying about the stories they want us to worry about, these are the real threats.
Right.
Werner, thank you very much. I'm afraid we're out of time.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay. And we're going to continue with the topic of climate change, though, with our next guest. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. We're continuing on the subject of climate change, and we're going to be talking with Elizabeth Woodworth about a new book that's come out. It's called Unprecedented: Can Civilization Survive the CO2 Crisis? And I think that's a very good question. The book is by David Ray Griffin. And Elizabeth, why don't you just tell us what you want to about the book?
Thanks, Jack. This book, I know the author quite well. I've worked with him, and I realized that of all the 40 books he's written, this is the most magnificent book on climate change that has appeared so far, to my knowledge, on the planet. I'm a sciences librarian, and I've written myself on global warming and climate change. And this book is just extraordinary because it outlines all the problems we have now with absolutely documented. And what it tells you about the existing problems, they've been kept out of the media. We just aren't hearing what's really going on in the world across the whole spectrum of issues. We do know about the weather. They can't stop us from knowing about the weather. But we don't know really about the droughts and wildfires, the catalog of droughts and wildfires, the heat waves, the sea level rise, the fresh water shortage that's going on all around the world. And all this is going to cause enormous food shortage, climate refugees, and then ultimately climate wars. And the severity of this issue, I think the media, partly because it's basically owned by the corporations these days, the media, and they don't want to scare people. They don't want a stampede of worry, and they certainly don't want people to divest from oil. If people knew how really severe the problems are becoming and how quickly they're becoming severe, they would divest from oil. And this huge divestment day that we had a few days ago, a global divestment day, there are so many people signed on now, institutions, governments, cities at all levels of government, and people are divesting from oil just because they know that we have to leave this fossil fuels behind us. So Dr. Griffin's book is called Unprecedented, and it's divided into 3 parts: unprecedented threats, unprecedented challenges and failures, and finally, what is to be done. And this is what you always ask, Jack, what can we do?
Maybe, can we start there?
Sure we can. We can go into, he's broken down, well, actually, it might be better in a way to show where the failures have been, because the people who've been failing us, the organizations that have been not rising to the what is actually scientifically known about climate change. There's this huge gap between the science, which is agreed to by between 97 and 99% of peer-reviewed scientists. The media has only been picking up about 57% of that, and they've been giving equal coverage to the false debate.
The media is totally corrupt on this issue. I
It's
mean, that's
absolutely,
just the way it is.
absolutely corrupt on the issue. So he actually goes into the where the failure comes from. The basic failure comes down to this false debate that's being waged in the media, and that's the fault of the fossil fuel companies that have basically provided the funding to generate that debate through false science, and the media, which has gone along with it. And then we have like a lot of denialism going on as a result, and nobody really wants to think about this all the time and realize how serious it is. So the public is left with this comfortable feeling that maybe it's not happening because we're getting two sides of it. And then there have been involved also is a kind of a huge moral issue, the morality that of intergenerational rights and privileges for our children and grandchildren. They are being held hostage. They're not even born yet, and they're being held hostage by our short-term needs and comforts. So Dr. Griffin is a philosopher of science and religion, and he goes into the morality and precisely how it works in the United States with all the evangelism, which is linked to the non-belief in evolution, and there's a huge block of people down there that's, like in the 35% that really don't believe in evolution. They don't believe in climate change. So how are you going to get anywhere with them until they read a book that explains to them how they've been misguided? And he does that. He's not putting people down at all. He's actually a teacher of the first water, and he's leading people out of ignorance in a kindly and kind of instructive way. The cumulative emissions, people say, well, China's polluting more than we are, but that's not true. Right now they are. They're polluting to make our goods. But historically, the US and Europe have actually contributed 58% of total global emissions into the atmosphere, and China has only contributed 10%. So we've got, that's misinformation. Whenever anybody says, whenever the climate
Elizabeth,
negotiators...
there's only 3 minutes left, believe it or not. So I would like to get to some of the things we have to start to do.
Okay, well, we have to get what really needs to happen, according to Dr. Griffin. And actually, this book would be good for several segments here. It's the most comprehensive treatment of this subject that exists, and it's been said in a recent review that it's a gift to humanity, to save humanity. So he takes all the segments that have been falling down on the job and says what they could do instead. And he starts with academia. We can't cover that now, but I can list the categories of people that he says can all contribute by turning their attention to this issue every time they make a substantive decision. And so we have activists, right? That's all we know about. Like, I'm an activist and Werner's an activist, but academia could be doing a lot more. They could be divesting. Agriculture and forestry professionals, business people can be stop investing in carbon and start investing in solar and wind and geothermal and ocean turbines. There's so many things. These things are getting better returns right now than oil is. That's why oil is diving. It's not because of Saudi Arabia. It's because oil is tanking in relation to new technologies.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, you won't hear it.
Yeah,
You will not hear that on the news. You'll hear that Saudi Arabia is manipulating oil. And that we have entertainers, we have mayors of cities. The legal profession could do a whole lot to redesign the legislation. I mentioned religious and moral thinkers, the whole sci-tech industry, but most of all, youth leadership. Youth is so concerned about this. They know that we've left them nothing, and they are really into it. And I think that this book, Unprecedented, Can Civilization Survive the CO2 Crisis by Clarity Press, that should be in every university library, like multiple copies, every public library. It should
And
be.
it should be on the front page of the papers, and it should be on radio and TV. Everybody, the media should be discussing it so people know about it. But I don't
Absolutely.
think we're going to hear a word about
I
it.
think we are. The reviews so far have just been incredible. Like a great service to humanity.
That's why we're not going to hear about it.
You're hearing about it right now.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Richard Falk, Professor Emeritus of Law at Princeton, said, if you can read only one book on climate change, let it be Unprecedented.
Okay. So, Unprecedented, I think we should all read it. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. In this segment, our guest is again going to be Walter McGuinness. And Walter, we're going to be talking about an issue that is very important to both of us, which is wireless radiation, the radiation that comes from all the technology around us, including your cell phone, including Wi-Fi. And we're going to be talking about how Health Canada and the federal government have completely betrayed us and let us down and sold us out on this issue. So take it away.
Well, the bottom line is they've been misrepresenting the facts on how they set their guidelines. And years ago, some of us figured this out, but we could never get them to say it. They always fudged their words and pretended that they were.
So what they say is that everything is safe. That's their official line. Wi-Fi is safe, cell phones are safe, etc.
That's a good point, because their definition of safety is any amount of radiation that you're exposed to that doesn't heat your tissue up too quickly is safe. That's called a thermal model or a tissue heating model.
Right, and the problem is that a lot of science shows that amounts of radiation, thousands of times less than that, still causes negative effects. So Health Canada is completely out of the ballpark.
Well, what they've said, though, is they said, we have taken in these so-called non-thermal effects into account when we were setting our guidelines. They very artfully didn't tell you how they did that. One part of their guideline, of course, electromagnetic radiation arrives in a whole spectrum of frequencies. Power line frequencies is 60 cycle per second. A cell phone's 2.5 billion cycles per second. So it's a very, very different frequency. Now, part of that frequency range, the very low frequency range, they actually took into effect biological effects as well as tissue heating. But for the radiation that is emitted from Wi-Fi, cell phones, baby monitors, and all that, they totally disregarded the so-called non-thermal effects. Now, we knew that was going on for years, but we could never prove it. Well, what happened was last year there was a court case in Quebec in which Rogers wanted to build a cell phone transmitter in a town. The townsfolk were fighting it. Eventually all landed in court. The Rogers brought in their expert was James McNamee, as their chief scientist of Health Canada in the research area for EMFs. And on the stand, when he was under oath, when the question was put to him, he had to admit that no, they did not take into account the non-thermal effects when setting their guidelines for the higher frequencies. And that's the big story, is that the government and Health Canada has misrepresented the truth here. They've pretended that they were taking into these non-thermal effects into account when they weren't.
So what that means is that when you use your cell phone and Health Canada says that's perfectly safe, they can only say it because they simply didn't look at the real science. They looked at something quite different.
Well,
they said if it's not heating your brain up, everything's okay.
Well, in fact, they allow it to heat your body, but only at a certain rate. So it's microwaving your body. And the thing is to remember, like often I'll use the analogy of like a cigarette. If I was sitting here with smoking a cigarette, I could harm you in two very obvious ways. One is I could just take the ash of the cigarette and burn your skin. That would be a thermal effect. Or I could just blow smoke into the environment. You could breathe it in, and eventually you get cancer 20 years from now. So there's two very different effects, both harmful. Now, Health Canada has only looked at the burning of the skin issue. So when it comes to microwave radiation, we know what microwaves do in a microwave oven. It heats tissue. And that's the only effect that they've recognized. So all the other biological studies, which are thousands and thousands now, are available that show associations between microwave radiation exposures, as like you say, thousands of times below what it would take to heat your tissue, but that alters biological activity. And some of that biological activity is very bad, and serious diseases occur. And what's very important for administrators to know, administrators in schools to know, that Health Canada is lying, plain and simple. You're not protected. The kids in these schools are not protected by these guidelines.
So you're talking about schools that have Wi-Fi.
Exactly. You know, it's a pretty tough place to be when you have to go against your own health authorities. But in this case, they are not protecting the public. You cannot rely on them to protect your health in this instance because they simply have not been forthright. And had this scientist not landed in court and had not been under oath, he would have continued misrepresented the truth in my view. But because he had to, you know, he felt compelled to tell the truth, he had to fess up and say, yeah, we're only looking at...
This was someone who worked for Health Canada.
He's the chief researcher for this area.
When did this court case happen?
It happened in Quebec last year.
I don't remember this being front page news.
No, it wasn't front page news. Actually, the decision still has not been rendered in the case. But this is something that happened within the case when...
was that the truth came out.
The truth came out.
And the truth is that when you're on your cell phone, it's hurting your brain, and it's hurting the rest of your body, and it's hurting your eyes, and it's hurting your ear, and it's hurting every part of your body. So be careful, use it less. And we all quit smoking a long time ago because we knew the dangers, and now everybody's using cell phones in part because we don't know the dangers. There's going to be a horrible, horrible price to be paid for this. The price people paid for smoking and cigarettes was horrible. I mean, people died horribly.
Well, it takes 20 or 30 years for a lot of cancers to develop, and
it's really disgraceful.
The technology is just rolling out, but the constant exposure to Wi-Fi in a classroom, the level of radiation is just almost the same as if the child was on the phone, on a cell phone all day. That's how powerful this is.
So what's going on in our schools is very bad.
The very worst people to be exposed are children because of the physiology. Their brains, their skulls are thinner, and the radiation penetrates more deeply.
And they're younger, and everything's growing and changing.
That's right. Their immune systems are developing, and they're being bombarded with radiation.
Now, if parents want or aren't concerned about that, and if the children aren't concerned, then I guess you have to say, go ahead and do it. But what's happening is everybody tells the parents and the children and the schools that it's safe. That's coming from the government, from Stephen Harper himself, from Health Canada, but it's not true. That's the problem.
Exactly, and I'm going on the record. They're lying to you. I'm going to recommend a couple of websites. I'm just going to hold this up. Maybe we'll get a shot of this, and maybe later do something else. But visit Citizens for Safe Technology. They have some excellent videos. We have Frank Clegg from Citizens for Safe Technology, is the ex-president of Microsoft Canada, who's saying this technology is dangerous, and he's doing excellent work. And of course, Meg DeHavis is the author of this article. She was also an expert witness in that trial, and she wrote an article about it. So it's very important, folks. Go to these websites and read up and get informed.
Does Health Canada work for ISIS? You know, I said last week, you know, I think the enemy we really have to fear is the enemy within this country, and we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you very much, Walter.
Great.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, February the 17th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria. I'd like to thank again the Shaw crew and our volunteers who make the show happen. Our guest in this segment is Will Smith. Will, you've been on the show many times before, and we're going to be talking about
consciousness
and movies.
Yes, I'm going to go into a couple of movies that I've seen that I think are interesting from the point of view of consciousness. And first of all, I'd just like to say that in the past I've talked about this before, and this time I'm going to go in a place that some people might disagree with because it touches on their religious beliefs. And I would just like to clarify that what I'm talking about here is not anything to do with faith or belief. It's just experiential. So I think one of the things I hear a lot of people are afraid. I mean, it was said several times on the show that we should be afraid, and I don't agree with that. I think that we should be brave, and we should face our fears, and we should figure out why we are where we are, and the thing that we can do to change the way we feel about that and not to be afraid is to change our consciousness. So one of the things that we have in our culture, just almost universally in our Western culture, is it's a culture of materialism. What you see is what you get. You're here, that's it, poof, you're gone. And I know I was brought up that way, even though I was raised in religious, or I was raised in an Anglican, I had an Anglican grade school and a Catholic high school. Even though they teach certain things, still the basic assumption is that if that's a belief. And I think that it's important now for us to realize who we are, try to find out a little bit more who we are, try to raise our consciousness. And there are several ways of doing that, because a lot of people aren't aware of ways that you can find out that you're not your body. And the most obvious one, or the easiest one, is to get into the flotation tank, because you're instantly a meditator. Something that might take you years to learn, you can do in 40 minutes or an hour, is get into the flotation tank and achieve that state of altered consciousness. And with enough time doing it and getting your body entrained, you can leave your body and you can find out that you're not your body. You can also do that with, some people do it with ayahuasca. There are some people who go to South America and do an ayahuasca trip with a shaman and find out. I've talked about that on the show. I think that's not very attractive to me, because I'm just not interested in taking drugs. I've never been a big person who's been interested in that. But it is, for a lot of people, that's a doorway. There's another thing called a darkness retreat, where if you go into a dark room, that's supervised, and this is usually done, not here, but I don't know, places like Thailand, where they do Tai Chi and other types of more traditional Chinese medicine, I think. And you go into a dark retreat for several days, and your pineal starts to activate, and you effectively are in REM sleep. You're dreaming while you're awake, and so that gives you a different state of consciousness, and different things happen to you. And then the last thing is that I've noticed, you can start doing. You can analyze your dreams. You can do lucid dreaming. You can kind of suggest to yourself that you want to remember your dreams, or some people call it astral traveling. I tend to think of lucid dreaming as when you become conscious within your dream, and astral traveling is when you never go to sleep. You just leave your body. So those are some things that most people aren't even, some people might even not be aware of those things. But those are things that if one of those resonates with you, you can access a different level of consciousness and start to realize that you're not your body. So I think that's the story really for me, is that I listen to all these things, and I think having a very limited education, grade school and high school, but we talked a lot about ancient history and mythology and things like that. I think the older cultures implicitly understood reincarnation, that this wasn't the only lifetime, that we're basically unconscious and we're not allowed to remember who we are, but that we come here to go to school. And so I mean, that's a big difference. If you think that you're dead and that's it, or you think that you're dead and you're never coming back here, then you have a different attitude about how you treat the place, for one thing, but you also have a different attitude about yourself. So what it looks like to me is that we're all being pushed into a corner, but that's not a bad place to be. It forces action. And the action that I think that needs to be taken for each individual is to access your own consciousness and find out more who you are. Now, some people, in order to start that off, to jump into being a meditator or something like that is a little difficult. So I've been looking for movies, and I found a couple of them. I watched Cloud Atlas, which was a big budget movie I think it was made in Germany by the same guys that did The Matrix. They spent $100 million on it. It's a complex film. It's hard to follow. I've seen it 3 times. I still don't get the plots, because you have all these people who are getting reincarnated, and then they come back and this time they're a man and the partner that they beat up is somebody else, or it's really complex and hard to track. But there's another one that I just saw last night, and it's called The Fountain, and it's much more simple. You have the same people, and you can see the interaction, and you can see the way their lifetimes, what they've done, and how it affects their lifetimes. So I would say that a really great way to start off with this is just to look at The Fountain. It's 2006. It wasn't a popular movie. In fact, it was canceled once. They had a $100 million budget, and then they cut it back to $50 million, and it only grossed $25 million. So I think the people weren't ready for that yet. So I would just suggest that that we all need to start looking at who we really are. So
can you give us an indication? Because I have no idea who I really am.
Well, yeah, the things. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed since I took up meditation is I have these things in my life that are puzzling to me, that I've been excited about. For example, when I was in my 20s, I was working as a chauffeur in Paris, and I listened on the radio every day when I got in a traffic jam. And there was a radio play by a Russian author, Mikhail Bulgakov. It's called The Master and Margarita, and I listened to that, and it just grabbed me. And I didn't know why. Why is that so interesting to me? And it's all through my life now, I've been accessing things that are Russian, and for some reason that always excites me. Well, why is that so? I can't say that I know for sure, but I can say that there's some link to Russian and Russian thought, and I'm studying Russian language now, so I'm seeing that the Russian language is quite different from our own language. So I think that's what you have to do, just find out what fascinates you. Why are you interested in this? Do you really know? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do that? If you start there noticing, what am I noticing? Wait, what is it that some people are going to look at the world and say, gee, Fukushima is really important to me, but I don't care about global warming because I don't believe in it. Which I can also understand because there are things going on Mars that we can't explain, so maybe it's in the solar system. That's the main point I want to make, is just accessing, who am I? And if we start there, the world is a lot less threatening instantly.
How is it like in terms of world issues and consciousness, how does changing your consciousness change your perception of issues, and even more important, how does it change the issues?
Well, if you look at the world and you see that everything is messed up,
yeah,
you're freaked out.
Yes.
I mean, you can't relax. If you look at it as though it's a holodeck, it's a place where we come to play war.
Right.
Then it just assumes a totally different nature. You say, what is my correct way? What is my correct action in this? You don't cheat. You don't, and you won't allow. You wouldn't allow yourself to do things that are expedient just to save a little time, and you would think of the future more. I mean, you think, what's going to happen when I come back? Which is the way the ancients looked at it.
Yeah, so we should really we're out of time. Will, thank you very much. We've got to take care of this world for a long, 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 long time, so let's start right now. Thanks for watching Citizens Forum.